This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines in today's edition of WYO Today Newsroom. Today, I'm so fortunate to be joined here in the studio by Megan Degenfelder. She's the state's current superintendent of public instruction and a candidate for governor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Megan, for our listeners out there who maybe don't know you super well, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your background, your experiences, and why you decided to put your name in the ring for governor.
Well, I'm born and raised right here in Wyoming, sixth generation. My family's been in agriculture for all those generations in the state. My family had a ranch just west of the Casper Airport. And so grew up in Casper, attending public schools, went to the University of Wyoming, which is where I met my husband, earned a master's degree in economics, and then built my career in the mineral industry. I worked for a coal company up in Gillette, and then more recently for an oil and gas company in the Wamsutter area. And then made that big jump from energy to education because I wanted to work to reform our education system and focus on career preparedness for our students. And so the last 3.5 years have been working as Wyoming State Superintendent. We've been really focused on career and technical education or the vocational ed. We've been focused on literacy reform, parental rights, and really ensuring that our education system is operating to prepare our kids for what's next, for the workforce.
Absolutely. Now, Megan, you have received some pretty resounding endorsements for your bid for Wyoming governor, including, I believe, twice President Trump has said, Wyoming, this is your next governor. And was it last week that you got the second one?
Yes, and he hosted a tele-rally for us, which was exciting. We had, I think, 20,600 folks that tuned in for that, which was really exciting.
Wow. Well, President Trump is not alone in endorsing you for this governor position. You've also been endorsed by organizations like Turning Point, Wyoming Right to Life, the Petroleum Association of Wyoming, and by many of your opponents' peers in the state Senate. Where do you think the support is coming from? Why do you think that you've got such, strong backing through these incredible endorsements?
Well, I think that all of these individuals and organizations, they've worked with me. They know what I represent and who I am, and they know that we need a bold leader in the governor's office, someone that's not just going to talk about the issues, but is really going to deliver for the people. And endorsements are important because they show that momentum. They show those leaders in the community, that folks that aren't as engaged in the process or in politics, they can look to their neighbors and say, if this person trusts this candidate, then I know I can too. And so that's a big deal. And so endorsements are important. Ultimately, the best endorsement or the greatest endorsement will be that of the Wyoming people on Election Day.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like earning that endorsement from President Trump?
Sure. So, this has been a relationship in progress over the last couple of years. And so it's really very simple how I earned the endorsement. I earned it. We worked for it. And in the last few years, working with the Trump administration on education issues in particular, President Trump has been very bullish in returning authority of education to the states away from the federal government. And if there's one thing that I push for across the board, it is for Wyoming to be in control, not United States Congress, not Washington, D.C. And so that's something that we really connected on. And then when you're talking about education in Wyoming, you're going to talk about energy because energy really helps to fund our education system. And so, I think that they, through that time and working together, they recognized my leadership and my initiative areas. And that's really what earned the endorsement.
Now, you have worked in Wyoming's coal and gas and oil industries, and you've now led a major state agency as superintendent of public instruction. Can you talk about how those experiences have prepared you to serve as governor for that top executive seat in the state?
Well, working in the mineral industry, you look at our tax structure in the state and really, our bread and butter is the mineral industry. When that industry does well, all of our other industries do well. And so I believe that it's time that we have someone in the governor's office that really has spent a career in the industry and knows how we do one thing, and that's to produce more energy. And so then we have a more constant revenue stream. We have stronger high paying jobs for our people here. And I think that's really important for our state to do well. I've also in that industry had to pull my hair out because of, government bureaucracy at its finest. And so I've seen firsthand being in the private sector, how that can really stifle growth and development. And then now having run a state agency, seeing what needs to change, where we need to really look to modernize state government so that it works better for the people. And so that I'll be able to do, hit the ground running. I don't believe that we've truly modernized state government since probably Governor Hathaway. And so it's high time that we do that we really look at a true overhaul of state government and ensure that it's operating in the most efficient way possible.
Now, Megan, can you unpack that point that you just made about the bureaucracy and some of the things where state government is kind of getting in the way of the oil and gas industry? Can you speak a little bit to how you really can work to promote oil and gas and make sure that our state government, isn't holding us back?
Well, if any listeners, are up at night, they can always find my 6-point energy plan that's on the website. It really gets into the weeds about how we get there. But generally speaking, a huge barrier is the federal government because in Wyoming, so much of the land and the resources are owned by the feds, just under half of the surface and then just over half of the subsurface. And so step one is stronger partnership with the federal government, achieving more primacy and decision making over development of our resources. But then also on the state side, sometimes our left hand isn't talking to our right hand. And so how do we make it more cost effective and more timely to be able to produce? How do we streamline our state agencies, that process? And it's everything from leasing to permitting to environmental stipulations. All of those things, when you add those up, they result in delays, and time is money. And so ensuring that we are more efficient and that we can produce more. And it's not even just coal and oil and gas, it's uranium, trona, bentonite, rare earth minerals. We have such an opportunity in Wyoming to get those minerals out of the earth, but then it's also about how do we process them? How do we build off in the manufacturing sector? There's a lot of opportunity to kind of grow within that value chain to support Wyoming.
Now, Megan, over the years, I know you and I have talked many times about your work as state superintendent of public instruction. I know you've really focused on some core principles and goals, and that list includes parental rights, career and technical education, academic fundamentals like literacy, and protecting girls' sports. Can you talk about what you're most proud of as under your term here as superintendent of public instruction and the work you've done in that, and what education reforms you would continue to pursue as governor?
Well, education is foundational to everything else that we talk about. Our economy doesn't exist if we don't have a strong education system and build out that workforce pipeline. And so I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've accomplished the last couple of years in my time as superintendent. I think overall, what I'm most proud of is showing the people of Wyoming that government does not have to move as slowly as we are made to think. We can get things done, incredible reform done in a short amount of time if you have the right people that are focused on the right things. And that's really what we've shown. And so you mentioned a few. Really proud of work in career and technical education. We have now increased our career tech ed concentrators. That's kids who specialize or take 2 courses within one particular career pathway by over 100%. And that just shows that kids, they want that hands-on learning. They want to be working towards a job in the future. And so that's been huge. Literacy reform. We passed historic literacy reform after several years of working with the legislature that will increase literacy rates for our students. And then all of those things of parental rights, protecting our parents, our families, incredibly important in our education system. And so we've still got a lot of work to do. I think more governors in this country should have a stronger focus on education. And that's what I plan to do in the governor's office, really to bring together now our workforce and industry. So Department of Workforce Services, all of our businesses in the state, how do we link them with our students so that they get more exposure, they get more experience, they're more likely to stay here and have opportunities here. And then it's also in the governor's office building that vision for higher education. So how do we, within our community college system, within our University of Wyoming and K-12, how do we meaningfully link those all together so that we're rowing in the same direction?
One of the things that I've really admired is that parental rights piece. I'm wondering if you can kind of expand on that a little bit about the work you've done on that issue and how you've really empowered parents and families when it comes to education.
Well, parents are the number one decision maker when it comes to their child's education. They have a constitutional right to direct their child's education. And I think after the pandemic, one silver lining there is we all saw that parents were in many ways being pushed out of the classroom, out of their child's education experience. And so this has been several different things. Number one is ensuring, stronger notification to parents. We worked with the legislature to be able to do that, making it easier for them to understand how schools are performing, assessment results. We've worked on that within the department. It's also been about giving historic school choice options. I love public education. That is a huge focus. And it's also about giving other options beyond the traditional public system, recognizing that all kids learn differently. And so how do you have options for those parents? It's about ensuring that we don't have sexually explicit materials in libraries, and in protecting girls' sports. Those have all kind of been in the vein of parental rights, ensuring that parents are in charge, they have options, and they know what to expect when it comes to their child's education. Curriculum transparency, we also had that as an initiative where we partnered with school districts all across the state to show what curriculum, what kids are being taught. Parents should know that.
Well, thank you for that. I know I've always really enjoyed our discussions about some of these goals and initiatives. I'm sort of watching them come to fruition has been really neat to see. Now, I wanted to turn the page a little bit and center on public lands. That has been a major talking point, I think, here in Wyoming and in this election. And we know that they are part of Wyomingites' everyday life here, whether it's grazing or hunting, whether it's energy development, tourism. And I'm wondering, what would you do as governor to keep those lands accessible and to make sure that we have a meaningful voice in federal land decisions here in Wyoming?
Well, first and foremost, our public lands are not for sale. If we lose our public lands to the highest bidder, we lose who we are as Wyoming. And so ensuring that those lands are protected. But it's not only that they just exist, but that there's access to those lands. And I've experienced in my life being a lifelong hunter, fisherman, and backpacker, you'll be on a trail and trees haven't been cleared. And so it's also management and access to those lands and ensuring that they're available for use. So how do we do that? Because, I don't think those decisions should be made in an office in Washington, D.C. They should be made right here in Wyoming, as local as possible. And so it's protecting the lands, making them more accessible, and then ensuring that Wyoming is in charge of decision making, not the federal government.
Now, Megan, one of the biggest challenges in places like Riverton, communities across this state is really keeping our young people and young families from, this trend of them just hitting the road and going somewhere else. Of course, that has impacts on our economy, on, our future and investments that businesses and individuals want to make here in Wyoming. What would your administration do about housing, about the workforce shortages, the lack of career opportunities for young people that really kind of seem like they are the root cause of our young people leaving the state?
Well, this issue is exactly why I'm running for governor. I am tired of young people leaving the state. We've got to keep our youth here if we want to have a strong economy moving into the future. So how do we do that, right? Everyone talks about this. We've been talking about it for a long time. How do we actually solve it? And that's what I'm interested in. Number one is a stronger economy with good, high-paying jobs here. And that's building out our mineral industry, our legacy industry, and tourism and agriculture, and looking at how we can expand in those areas. But it's also about affordability, being able to afford to live here. And so that housing and healthcare are two of the most foundational aspects of that. You could have the greatest job opportunity in the world, but if you can't find a place to live, then it doesn't really matter. And so ensuring that there is availability of housing and that it's affordable. And so a lot of ideas how we do that, from deregulating to ensuring that we're investing in that baseline infrastructure of water, sewer, curb and gutter. And then healthcare is another piece. How do you ensure that folks can even afford to pay their premium? And, as a cancer survivor with a husband in the healthcare industry, this one's deeply personal to me. And so making sure that we're reducing the overall cost of healthcare and access as well, because we have these healthcare deserts all around the state. And so if you can't have access to it, then we've got a problem. And so building that. So it's all of these things together. And then it's also connecting. I talked a little bit in the education space about connecting business and industry to our students. I coach the UW women's rugby team. And when I have seniors that tell me they're leaving the state, I of course ask them why. And they tell me it's because there's no job here. Well, then you go talk to businesses in the community and they say, we can't find workforce. We can't fill our jobs. So there's this gaping disconnect here. And that is our job at the state to really connect those two, to build that bridge, connect students with the opportunities that actually exist here that they might not think are available. And so really looking forward to doing that as well. But this is paramount to our future. If our young people continue to leave, then we don't survive.
I was just talking with, some folks at the University of Wyoming about some internship opportunities and opportunities just for young people, for students, for new graduates. And come to find out, there's a bunch of programs where that internship piece is required. Mm-hmm. And, the students are saying, well, I can't find an internship. And then we're over here saying, I can't find interns,
Exactly.
And it's like there is sort of a missing link in that process. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. It's absolutely a problem out there that we need to be solving, across, industries and, professions and everything. Now, part of what we're talking about here really is economic development generally. That is kind of the link, I think, to a lot of these different issues that we've touched on today. And I'm wondering if you can talk specifically about economic development during a time where, there's a lot of uncertainty out there about the future. The price increases for families right now are really, people are feeling that and kind of wondering about what is on the horizon. What are we going to do here in Wyoming to strengthen our economy and feel more confident about it?
Well, I'm glad you say economic development, because I think for too long we had this buzzword of diversification, and we almost turned our back on our legacy industries and tried to diversify completely different. And the fact of the matter is, with our tax structure in the state, we can't really do that. It's a net pull on our resources when we do. And so I think first and foremost is to recenter on what we're really good at. And I mentioned, I have my master's degree in economics. This is an economic principle. You specialize. And so focusing on what we're good at and then building out that value chain. So, I sound like a broken record, but talking about our mineral industry, that is number one. And so how do we build out more opportunities when it comes to processing our minerals and the manufacturing industry as well? And then you look to new opportunities. We, of course, need to keep a strong agriculture economy here. Tourism is now growing. It's now the number 2 industry in the state. And then I think there's really exciting opportunities when it comes to technology, to digital assets that we can have here in Wyoming. And it's all about making sure that we can protect our way of life here. We don't want to become a Colorado or a California, but also having those good paying jobs that work really for Wyoming. And so I am very optimistic about our economy here in the state. I think when we focus on the right things, we can really unlock that potential that we've kind of been supportive of. We've done okay, but we can take it to a whole new level, and that will be good for people in Wyoming.
I hear what you're saying there, Megan, about, maybe a disagreement about what the best approach is when we all have our eye on the same outcome that's desired. And sometimes I think in recent years, what we have seen at the state level is in the governor's office, working with the legislature, there's sometimes been this conflict here, or this butting of heads. And I'm wondering, I think sometimes maybe that is right. Maybe that's healthy. Maybe the legislature's kind of off in the weeds, and maybe we're keeping each other in check a little bit. But I'm wondering how you would approach work with the legislature to make sure that there is meaningful lawmaking reform, and that we all kind of are working together on economic development and some of these big pieces for the future of Wyoming.
Well, the beauty of our government system is that there are all those levels of checks and balances. That's a good thing. And a healthy amount of conflict, I think, is a good thing. The problem becomes when we are in a gridlock and we are not being productive for the people in the state. And so when you have that amount of conflict, it's not good for anybody. And part of the reason I got into this race is I'm tired of extremism, whether it's in the legislature or in the executive branch. We need folks who can work with anyone to move forward on this vision that I'm expressing. That's what I've shown that I can do in the legislature. I probably frustrate some people because they try to put me in a box and try to label me, and that's never worked very well for me. And so being able to work with individuals to really move Wyoming forward. And so we have to move past that kind of divisiveness to really improve life for people in Wyoming, because all this bickering happening in Cheyenne, that's not helping the individual in Riverton that is struggling to stay in their home. They're struggling to make ends meet. And so, that should be our focus always. And it's about looking to think outside the box on some of these issues. You can't just have a Band-Aid approach. You can't just push the easy button that a lot of politicians want to do. And it isn't just, a little bit of grant money here and there, picking winners and losers. It's how do we actually work upstream and identify what is the issue that's getting us here? And then how do we fix that? Because I'm not interested in temporary solutions. We're talking solutions that are going to outlive any of us. And that's really what our focus should be.
Now, Megan, we talked a little bit about your background, about your vision for leading Wyoming into the future, and your role as governor. And I'm wondering, I think, a couple of years ago we were talking, and I had people were telling me, like, Megan is really going places. Like, you got to watch her. For sure, she's going to be the next governor. But I feel like there also were some options out there too, as you kind of take your next step into, leadership in Wyoming and in this part of the country. What is it about the governor's office that gets you excited about that role in particular?
Well, I love Wyoming, and I look at Congress in Washington, D.C. It's quite a mess out there, and so where can I make the greatest impact? That's always been the question that I ask myself. Growing up in an agriculture family, you're putting everything you have into something that is bigger than yourself, that's going to outlive you for generations to come. And so that's always been the mindset for me. Where can I serve in the greatest capacity? And I see the role of governor as being able to do that. Being able to bring my experience and expertise in energy and education and in governance together to really unlock the potential of our state. And that's where I see that this role is really that powerful place where we could do that.
Mm. Now, Republican voters have got a lot of choices in this primary across the ballot. And as they're looking at those candidate names for the governor's office, let's talk to the voters directly right here. If you're listening, Megan, tell us what separates you from the other candidates, and what are going to be some of your first priorities when you step into that role.
Well, number one, as I mentioned, is my unique experience that spans from energy to education to running state government. And so being able to step into the governor's office and really hit the ground running on day one. But not only that, my campaign is about ushering in this new generation of leadership, really bringing in the young people in this state into the fold of decision making. My generation is going to be a generation that lives with the consequences of decisions that we're making today. It's also about bringing in bold, innovative leadership. I'm not interested in status quo. What this means for me is thinking outside the box and really leading the country. I think as you look across the nation, folks are looking to states of who's going to step up, who's going to lead this country. It's not just even about leading here in Wyoming. And Wyoming, we have a history of doing that. We granted women the right to vote before any other state. We didn't care what anyone had to say about it. We did what was best for Wyoming. And then what happened? The rest of the country followed us. That's the type of leadership that I plan to bring into the governor's office.
Now, we're in the final stretch here. The election is coming up here on Tuesday. And I'm wondering, as you go into the polls to cast your own ballot, What are the things that you're going to be thinking of when you look at the races across the board? And what do you really encourage other voters to be thinking about as they walk in there and make those choices?
Well, of course, always to know the candidates, to do the research before going into the polls on election day. But for me, it's really of who is going to usher in the future of Wyoming, who's not going to look back, but is going to be looking forward and actually has concrete ideas. I get tired of politicians that talk about the things, all the buzzwords and the political rhetoric, but who actually is bringing up solutions, real solutions here. I think that is what all voters should be looking at, and that they should expect out of their elected leaders.
Now, I'm wondering, I know that there is a debate coming up tonight, and can you give us a little bit of the insight behind the scenes of what are the next few days going to look like for you as you campaign for governor?
Well, they're fast and furious. Just in the last few days, we've been hosting events in 7 different counties, I think it's been. And so traveling around, getting in front of as many voters as possible, hosting meet and greets, the debate, of course, tonight, and then kind of get out the vote. I want to ensure that folks know about Election Day, that they're getting out, getting young people to the polls. Young people are historically not as strong at showing up on Election Day. And so how do we ensure that folks are getting out, they're voting, and they're caring about the future of Wyoming?
So as you're out there campaigning, Megan, what are some of the number one concerns that you're hearing from voters, and what are those conversations looking like? As you speak directly to the folks who are making these decisions on Tuesday.
Well, it's interesting. Our state, our communities are really spread out across the state, and they're all unique and different, which is what makes Wyoming incredible. But yet at the same time, they all are tied together in some way, and so we share a lot of the same opportunities and the same challenges. Biggest issue that continues to come up is affordability. Can people make ends meet? Can they afford to live in the state of Wyoming? And then can young people in particular afford to do that? And so that's why I talk so much about our economy and ensuring we have strong jobs and that we lower the cost of living, because that's what people in Wyoming are deeply concerned about. And that's what policymakers should be addressing.
Before we go here, this isn't a debate, but I just wanted to give you kind of an opportunity for some closing remarks. What do you want to leave voters with, in the back of their minds as they're studying candidates here, weighing the options and thinking about who Megan Degenfelder would be as Wyoming's next governor?
Well, I would say that Wyoming's best days are ahead of us. And when we have strong leaders that aren't afraid to try new things and really think differently and lead unapologetically, that's really when Wyoming will succeed. And I think that's the opportunity that we have before us. I think we're at a bit of a crossroads in that way of, will we tread water? Will we just slowly manage our decline like so many of these other states in the country have done? Or will we decide that Wyoming's meant to lead? And that's really what this is about. And it's about this exciting new time for Wyoming to build a stronger economy where we really grow jobs, where we connect students with our business and industry, where we think so innovatively and we operate government in a whole new different way. That's really what it's about. And so I think it's an exciting time. I think that's what my campaign really represents. And I just would be deeply honored and humbled to have the support of our listeners on August 18th.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much. This is Megan Degenfelder. She's our current state superintendent of public instruction and a candidate who's been endorsed by President Trump and a number of other leaders across Wyoming and organizations as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck in the coming days as we lead up to the primary.
Thank you for having me.
This show has been paid